Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone who is watching us, all our esteemed panelists, guests, and amazing participants. I hope you and your families are well and safe. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our event today. I'm Omnihal Omrani. I'm from Cairo, Egypt, and I'm currently the liaison officer for public health issues for the International Federation of Medical Students Association. It is absolutely wonderful to have you all join our event today. We are going to explore the imperative intersection between climate change, adolescent health, and well-being. As we all have our eyes on COP26, we are here to ensure that the world is watching and listening to the 1.2 billion plus voices of adolescents globally. This has been the largest cohort of adolescents that the world has ever seen, and I'm proud to be saying that this nearly constitutes nearly 16% of the world population. I recently heard a very interesting poem by a poet called Mombi Macchiara, and it has a line that really resonates with me. It says, "If you are not on the table, then you are on the menu," which means that with the global climate conversation happening and our role as adolescents and youth is eminent to shape a safe and a healthy climate that is not just a necessity, it's an absolute right. Adolescents and youth, we are the most impacted by the effects of climate change, our current and future generations to come. Not only does climate change increases significantly the disruption to adolescents and youth safe and supportive environment, it leads to impaired access and diminished to nutrition, healthcare services, education, employment, as well as our physical and psychological health and well-being. Hence, it makes absolute sense for us as youth to be at the table, to be involved in a meaningful and sustainable way at the decision-making, acknowledging our role, ensuring that we play a critical way to shape the future of climate change discourse on a local, national, regional, and global level. As the global consensus statement on meaningful adolescent and youth engagement, it defines meaningful engagement, a word that we always seem to hear a lot and say a lot. And it means that the power is shared, respective contributions are valued, and young people's ideas, perspectives, skills, experience, and strength are integrated into the design and the delivery, as well as the implementation, evaluation of programs, strategies, frameworks, funding mechanisms, as well as organizations. This affects the lives of us, communities, and countries worldwide. As I'm proud to say, we are a community of young, active change makers. We are passionate about climate change and adolescent well-being. We are committing to mainstream adolescent well-being in the climate change discourse. We are committing to 3 asks in our call to actions for adolescents. The first is to engage and empower adolescents. The second, to go beyond the health sector, be and embrace multidisciplinarity and launch a powerful multi-sectoral response. The final call to action would be to strengthen political commitment and funding through a high-level dialogue on adolescents and youth during the UN SDG Summit, which is coming up in 2023. Together, we can ensure that it results in concrete policies, integrated programs, and sustained investments for adolescent well-being. After the last conference, COP25, which was the conference of the parties in Madrid, and that was 2 years ago, youth and youth-led networks around the world recognized the disconnection and the gap between health and well-being sector with the climate change discussion. As a first step for adolescent, youth, and youth-led organizations' engagement, they have come together. We have written a brief, which I'm a proud contributor of, and it's called the Young People's Fight Against Climate Change Action We Can Take for Our Health and Well-Being. The brief outlines effectively ways in which awareness, knowledge, and capacity building of us as adolescents and youth can be enhanced. How can you engage in this global movement for climate change? How young people must and can act against climate change and its impact on their well-being. The link to the brief will be shared with you all in the chat. I invite you to check it out, and we encourage you to share this to amplify our voices, our opinions, as well as with your networks and with youth worldwide. Now is the time to start the conversation that we have waited for a very long time to start, and hear from you on other ways that we can take collective action for the health of the environment and our own health. So before I start, I would like to share a few housekeeping rules. Please feel free to use the chat. We want to hear from your comments, your remarks. I already see a lot of greetings from around the world, so please use the chat as freely as you want. Please keep Zoom in speaker view. And if you're sharing about this event on social media, which we highly encourage, I would like you to also use the hashtag Adolescent2030. So I would love to start right now with a very unique performance. As you have known that COVID-19 has been a disaster that has pushed us out of our comfort zones like never before. Its impacts will continue to be felt across the world for many years to come. So before we start the high-level dialogue and panel, we have a performance by Kai Jara, I hope I spelled it correctly, and Cando Puri, two amazing Brazilian rappers who are going to share with us their performance on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Somos nós agora. Bom dia a todos. Essa música se chama Pandemia e ela está disponível com tradução para vocês acessarem pelo YouTube também. Não foi só bala que matou meu povo, não. Epidemia mudou mais de uma nação. Um rio de sangue na água cristalina. Até o contato com suas roupas de assassino. Mudando da minha miséria na mente lápis de uma velha floresta. Tipo uma onça rugindo na cela indígena, gritando na favela. Vendo cultura. A epidemia vem matando o maior grupo de risco há mais de 500 anos. Eu tentei, me isolei e sempre ficam nessa de querer fazer contato. Não é igual, aerofino é sabe qual e mais real. Doença que contagia causando falência múltipla de órgãos. Tava na mata, vem e me mata. Numa falência múltipla de povos. Vi meu parente indo se lavar. Um grande rio de lama tóxica preveniram se contaminar. Isso é uma guerra biológica. Tu que nunca foi de banho tá aprendendo a lavar a mão. Vai comprar tudo de álcool em gel. Olha pra tua poluição. Andourita, granchorico. Tá, mexida tiarreia, capo na prica, bonã. Ando retacrando. Ando rompo la chamada. Intriga que cata no metade. Ando rompo la chamada. Quando pra condonar. Ando rompo la chamada. Intriga que cata no metade. Ando rompo la chamada. Quando pra condonar. Não foi só bala que matou meu povo, não. Epidemia mudou mais de uma nação. Rio de sangue na água cristalina. Até o contato com suas roupas me assassinam. Não foi só bala que matou meu povo, não. Epidemia mudou mais de uma nação. Rio de sangue na água cristalina. Até o contato com suas roupas me assassinam. Como a varíola, como a gripe, tantas que o tamu suportou. Ninguém solta a mão de ninguém, ainda bem que ninguém segurou. A moteca usei, e eu errei que é pé, e quiser zoma é o iné. Epitaneira fui pro pé. Epitaneira fui pro pé. Epitaneira fui pro pé. Epitaneira fui pro pé. Epitaneira fui. Obrigada a todos. Nos sigam nas redes sociais, @caê. Esse é o Cando Puri. Nós estamos muito agradecidas de estar aqui compartilhando um pouco da nossa arte com vocês e pretendemos também continuar compartilhando. E para isso, sigam a gente. E é isso. Até mais.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing performance. Thank you for your time and for giving us this incredible performance. That was so beautiful. A big thank you to Kaya Kanudu. I'm truly inspired. And this should serve as a reminder to the effects that we have seen on the destruction of nature and human health, that we are now seeing more than ever, especially through the increase in vector-borne diseases like with the infectious disease of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the devastating impact that it has occurred beyond health, especially on the indigenous population and their lands. So on this note, I would like to move to our exciting first panel discussion, where we have an absolute stellar lineup of speakers that I'm very excited to be speaking with today. So first of all, I would love to introduce my absolute and personal idol, who is the Right Honorable Helen Clark, Board Chair of PMNCH. We also have His Excellency Yusuf Mustafa, the Minister of Youth and Sports of Ghana. We also have we have Dr. Anthony Costello. He is the co-chair of the Lancet Countdown, one of the key reports on tracking the progress on health and climate change. We also have Nefisha Richardson, the founder of Spark SFG, St. Vincent and the Grenadines delegate, and who is also at the Youth for Climate Milan. Finally, we have Julieta Martinez. She's the founder of Tremendous Collaborative Platform and the co-founder for Latinas for Climate. So I would love to give the floor to Nefisha and start with you. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. You started your journey at the age of 7, which has been so inspiring and exceptional. You have been working in the space of well-being, gender, and climate change, and this is just a few. As a young leader and passionate activist with many years of experience, why do you think that it's important that all those involved in the global well-being, especially the adolescent health and well-being advocacy, are vocal and learn about climate change?
Hi, good day, everyone. I'm so sorry I was having some technical difficulties earlier, but I'm so happy to be here. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of these amazing activists and world leaders. As we realize with the climate issue, we should all be vocal about it because it literally affects all of us. It doesn't matter where you're from, how old you are, what your beliefs are, what your ethnicity is. It affects all of us. And we can look at the different sectors that it affects. If we look at things like food and food security, the rising sea levels and the rising temperatures have the ability to affect what we can eat, the ability to produce food. If we look at the educational sector, so many people, specifically in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are unable to go to school currently because of our recent volcanic eruption, as well as the pandemic. And a lot of this has to do with climate change because we recently had a storm that, due to the issues with the volcano, we had a lot of flooding and lahars, and people have been displaced from their homes. So they were unable to go to school. If you look at even our money, our finances, because of all of these competing factors, so many countries aren't able to meet their GDPs, they aren't able to meet the export levels. So we're struggling financially. So if you look at the issues, not just on their own, but in a group setting, and look at how they affect all of these different problems, and realize I have to speak up. I have a role to speak up as a citizen, whether it's not affecting me directly, but it's affecting everyone around me.
Thank you so much. And this has been, sharing your personal experience and seeing the accelerating impacts of climate change, as you have mentioned with the volcanoes, and how it affects access to healthcare services, access to nutrition, access to education. And this really presents the urgent need for us to act now, as we are seeing many of the extreme weather events increasing. So thank you, Nafisha, for sharing your experience. I would like to move on to Helen. You recently edited a book, Climate Ayatollah, calling out governments for a tediously slow response to climate change. In the current context, the link between climate change and its impact on adolescent well-being is yet not enough. There is a gap that it's not recognized. So why do you think the reason behind this is, and how can adolescent well-being be mainstreamed into the conversation and the global policy making around climate change?
Well, good evening, everyone from New Zealand, late at night. And let's begin by making the obvious statement that climate change is an existential threat to the health and well-being of all of us. And for today's adolescent and youth generation, a very large generation of 1.8 billion people, it's going to fall on your shoulders to do better than earlier generations have done, and to draw the links between what is happening to our climate and what is happening to our health, and what that means for the prospects of current and future generations. You know, when COVID struck, a lot of governments, not all, but many, were capable of very rapid action. We then look at climate change, which has been signalled as a train wreck for decades. Action has been far too slow, and often in democratic societies like my own, it's stop, go. One government says go, the next one comes along and puts the brakes on. Now, how do you defeat this? You defeat it by active civil society demanding better of whoever is in government. And my advice, if you would accept it, to young people is use your voice. You are extremely numerous. You are active. You get it. You've done the school strikes. You're out there, you know, with the movements, passionate about climate action. Now, I'm increasingly seeing more and more interest in drawing the links between health and well-being and climate change. And let's face it, our health is something that is so important to each of us. Without our health, you know, we can't be, you know, we want a health, and anything that's going to impact on that, as climate change will, with its high temperatures, its heat stress, its more recurrent droughts, its more recurrent other disasters of adverse weather effects, its rising sea levels. This is a threat to us. It's a threat to current and future generations. So my advice is use your voice. And there was reference earlier to the likely high-level dialogue on adolescence during that UN SDG summit. That is a platform, but there will be many platforms. I hope to see the youth voices active on the health and climate change links at the Glasgow COP this year. And let's hope there's online possibilities, because it's not so easy for many young people from around the world to get to Glasgow when we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This could be a very inequitable COP, the Conference of Parties, if there's not special measures taken to ensure that everyone's voice can be heard. So my message is really one of encouragement. I know that a statement has been developed from adolescents and youth in the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health constituency. And we stand for meaningful youth engagement. We do our best to promote it and to support you to be out there wherever it counts, making your voice heard. Don't stand back. It's your future that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Helen. I think it will resonate with me that as young people, we need to use our voice. And as civil society, we have the power to increase the public pressure on the governments to scale up the ambition that we need, the ambition that we need for COP26 and for beyond. I also agree with you in terms of the number of platforms that we need to use. Now we have a brief that has been developed by young people with them in engagement of youth-led organizations as well as youth around the world. And it's a start for us to really integrate adolescent health and well-being within the climate negotiations, policies, and so on. Thank you again, Helen. I would like to move on to Anthony, who is with us. And yes, so you are part of the Lancet Countdown, tracking progress on health and climate change report. I have been personally following up on the report every year during its release. I know the 2021 report is coming up very soon. And the Lancet 20, I remember from the Lancet 2019 report, which outlines how young people are disproportionately bearing the impacts of climate change, both physically and psychologically. So when it comes to, from a research perspective, is there enough literature on the potential impacts of climate change specifically on adolescent well-being? And if you have seen gaps, where do they exist?
Thanks very much, and sorry I'm joining by phone rather than on the computer, but look, adolescents are central to climate change. It's their future. It's not my future, it's theirs, you know, and they should be at the center of the Sustainable Development Goals. That's why I welcome today's event. And the Lancet Countdown on tracking progress on health and climate change is linking with a new initiative that Helen Clark's involved in on the WHO UNICEF Children in All Policies group. But we all know adolescents are neglected. They are neglected in terms of health services, school health services. Local authorities and governments don't consult with adolescents. And I'm afraid research donors have massively missed out on investment in research on effects on children. And when you think about it, adolescents are crucial for the future health of health and also the economy. You know, between 10 and 19, it's you decide how you eat, how you exercise, the skills you develop, your education, how you sleep, deal with stress and anxiety, whether you drink, whether you smoke, what drugs you take, and also issues around masculinity and your relationships and how you treat women if you're a boy, and how you cope with mental health issues. And of course, whether you have a pregnancy or not. And ironically, what the donors all focus on is that last thing about pregnancy and contraception. But there's so much more to being an adolescent. And Iceland led the way, actually. They realized they had a massive issue with adolescent health about 20 years ago, and they introduced a whole range of things around parental guidance, creating spaces for recreation, for conversation, role models, negotiating with adolescents to improve their well-being. And I think in terms of research, to answer your question, there's massive things that we could do. Adolescents really love two things. They love their mobiles and they love their peer groups. And, you know, I've worked with peer groups and doing research on that with women's groups and men's groups showing big improvements in health, maternal health, newborn health, diabetes and the like. But we need to do that with adolescents. And the only trial I know of in India that ran for 3 years, unfortunately, has been disrupted by the pandemic. So we need to look much more at that, at young people's creativity. Adolescents are incredibly creative, and we need to use them to celebrate culture, citizen science, environmental greening, urban renewal, building climate resilience. And we are working on a new program in Pacific Islands and Nepal to use citizen science run by adolescents to collect information about environmental resilience and hopefully to scale up. So, you know, I think my world has been very different from the world of adolescents in future. We need new career structures. We need to reflect the zero carbon sustainable world that we need and build a different economy. And central to that is adolescents. We can do so much more to hear their voices, support them, and build a great future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anthony, for your incredible intervention and for being very, you know, you were very honest when it comes to the challenges that adolescents are facing in terms of, you know, being neglected when it comes to policy making as well as research. But at the same time, you've given us the hope by how youth can be involved when it comes to research as your project that I'm so excited to see the outcome of in Nepal. And at the same time, how we can use our voices, how we can use our creativity through social media and other means to really address the climate crisis and be involved at the heart of its design and implementation and action. Thank you again, Anthony, and we're happy to have you. I would like to move on to Julieta, and you have a very, very impressive bio, and I would like to reflect on, as a young activist from your career, what have you done to engage on climate change issues, and why is this issue that you have demonstrated you're passionate about is close to you?
Wow, that's an amazing question. And I would like to start by saying thank you so much for having me. And I think I'm going to start by the bottom of the question. You know, why is this issue so close to my heart in this case in particular? So I'm from Chile. Chile's not that, it's not that like big, right? It's a really long country that you find in global south. And right now there's a lot of inequities. You know, there's 1% of the population that concentrates around the 26.5% of the total capital. And when I was 12 years old, it was the first time that I considered myself privileged. No, it was the first time I questioned myself, why am I having things that other people my age are not having it? Why do you have access to education when not every single kid here doesn't have access to education? Why do I have access to internet? And I noticed that at a really young age because I needed to get out of my comfort zone because of the people that was around me. You know, the first person that showed me that I was living, you know, like in a bubble was my mom. Basically what she always has told me. She has always been supportive and an amazing person. I really, really love her. And at a really young age, she tried to show me that, you know, that the school is this big and the world can even fit in my hands, or in my arms in this case. And one thing that frustrated me the most was that the people around me, normally that was privileged as well, you know, it's not like being extremely rich, but having access to these kind of things, were the same people that did absolutely nothing about it to change it. Because why bother in doing something for others when you already have it? So I wanted to do something. I wanted to act. So what I did was, if I have access to internet today, I have to take advantage of it. So I started learning. About the climate crisis, how it does affect people, how it does affect communities, how does it affect the ecosystem. And I found something particular that caught my attention, that it's the sacrifice zones. I don't know if you have heard that concept before, but it's a concept that here in Chile we have used it from a lot of times. Sacrifice zones in the past, it was like places where war happened or conflict happened, and the places were completely destroyed because of conflicts. And this term started to kind of mutate to something different, and it was extremely connected to contamination and polluted areas. There are places here in Chile that we call the sacrifice zones, where it's extremely, extremely, extremely contaminated. And there is people living. There's young people. There's older people. There are women, there are men, there are everyone. And of course, ecosystem that being destroyed every single day. You know, I wanted to give a really big shout out to the amazing presentation that happened before. You know, like when we heard these amazing musicians, rappers, because Brazil right now is one of the countries that's most affected by like persecuted, how to call it in English, I think it's environment defenders, persecuted and a lot of times killed. And that's a reality that we see in Colombia, we see in Argentina, we see in Chile as well. So it was the need of getting out of my comfort zone. It was the need of acting for the people I love. And if I don't know that, of course, I'm not going to know all the people around the world. But if I can do something, even if it's little, to make a real impact, I need to do it. So basically, in like the long story short, what I did was I needed to understand that every single crisis is connected. When we talk about a climate crisis, we're talking about a social crisis as well. And when we talk about social crisis, we're talking about a crisis that affects directly women, because the climate crisis has a woman's face. 70% of the world's poorest people are women. 80% of climate refugees are women and girls. Girls that normally live in rural areas, that doesn't have access to education, that live in really poor conditions, and doesn't have the tools or mechanisms to not only react to the problem, but get out of the problem. So what I started to do, I work on a foundation that's called Tremendas, that works directly on women and girls. We give access to them to education and different tools and mechanisms that can help them create projects connected to the SDGs and social causes. And based on that, we started working with private sector, universities, foundations, organizations, and we created a space, an academy called Climáticas, that gave 600 girls around Latin America and the Caribbean access to education with a gender perspective. It was an amazing work. I'm really happy to say that we got lots of girls really interested into a second session to continue working in this world of education and basically show the world that girls' education is a climate solution.
Thank you. I hope you all heard the same number that I just heard right now, which is 600 girls. That's amazing. And I can't wait to see the many more numbers that you are going to reach with your amazing advocacy and grassroots action. And I really love how you started by reflecting on what you have. And I think as young people, we should see our access to the internet and to education as simple as it is, as we see it as a basic need. Many other young people around the world don't have that. And it's in our responsibility to help and one another and to help young people, even those who are offline as well as online, to learn and gain the same access that we do. Thank you, Julieta, so much. I'm personally inspired. And again, very looking forward to your next intervention. Right now, we're going to move on to our last speaker. We have His Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports in Ghana, Hon Evans Obuku Bobby. We have been speaking about the gaps in research, as well as governments who are acting slowly on the impacts of climate change, as Helen has mentioned, on adolescent and well-being. In your opinion, and from a government perspective, how do you think governments can accelerate the action that is needed and the impact of climate change on young people?
Well, very well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to the very important topic that is also a global issue. As you are aware, climate change is a very important thing that has to be addressed. And more so when it touches on adolescent youth, because their life will be positively affected because they are the future leaders. In Ghana, government has taken a number of actions seeking to address the issue of climate change. And then government also recognized climate change as a critical need for ensuring multi-sectorial issue, where a lot of young people are engaged in a afforestation project. Currently in Ghana, we have young adults who are engaged in afforestation projects, trying to plant a lot of trees to get the forest back. And it is being implemented by Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources in conjunction with our Ministry of Sports and Youth, because we are in charge of youth development in Ghana. So we have a lot of degraded land that government has initiated a conscious effort to ensuring that that degraded land is replanted to get the forest back. That in itself can also address the climate change. So as I said, through Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, a project was launched, and the project is called Green Ghana Project. That project is targeting the youth by ensuring that they plant about 5 million trees. And the project was launched in June this year. And then there is also an aggressive afforestation program that is being implemented by Forestry Commission under the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. And a lot of young people have been engaged across the country to plant trees to help sustain the forest reserve and the country, as well as attaining the SDG goals, among others. With the Pioneer Friday experience in Accra, Ghana's capital, and some part of northern region, affects livelihood, health, and well-being of residents. The National Disaster Management Organization, there's an organization in Ghana called NADMO, the National Disaster Management Organization, has also put in place several strategies to reducing vulnerability to food-related hazard, especially in urban centers and involving young people in this strategy. So in the nutshell, in Ghana, if we come to all the strategies and then the interventions our government have put in place to addressing climate change, I would say that the focus is on the young people, particularly the adolescent youth. So that is what government of Ghana is doing to ensuring that the climate change is addressed in Ghana.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. And it's always very important for us as young people to see governments collaboration with youth, especially as you have mentioned in the diverse projects that you work together. I'm also very interested to see how different ministries were involved. And I hope to see in the next project, the Ministry of Health as well, involved in the initiatives that you're leading for climate change with young people. So thank you for sharing and for highlighting the critical role that's played by young people in the policy making for climate change and the health of the environment.